friends. My name is Shawne Arceneaux, but you can call me Shawne. I'm a board-certified nurse coach and holistic healer, and I want to help you transform your life in a way that feels in total alignment with your heart and who you truly are. Each week, I'll be sharing with you my tips on how to become more empowered in your own wellness journey and create a vibrant, fulfilling life that reflects your values and your truth. You'll hear insightful interviews on different life and wellness topics and stories from myself and other beautiful souls who share my mission of spreading love and light in this sometimes dark world. My hope for this podcast is that you will walk away feeling inspired and more aligned in your purpose. This is your permission to get curious and lean into your intuition as we all learn and grow together. Welcome to the Aligned and Well podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Aligned and Well podcast. I'm super excited for today's guest. And for those of you who are coming to Sterling Rose's and I's Be Seen retreat this summer, the guest that I have here today is going to be the chef at our retreat. It is Nicole from Season and Cycle. I'm so pumped to have you here. Thank you, Nicole, for joining us.
So happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and can't wait to cook later this summer as well.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I've heard so many good things about the food. So I am really excited. So I'll just get into a little bit about Nicole and then I'll have you expand a little bit more on your story here. But so Nicole is a holistic women's health practitioner, and she passionately supports women who have recently come off hormonal birth control or are thinking about it and restore and reconnect with their natural cycle. So she does a lot of work with cyclical living, and I'm really pumped to just kind of dive into some of these really important topics. I know for me, this has been a really important topic. Could you just give my audience a little introduction of yourself, your story, how you got here?
Yeah, definitely. It's always a winding road, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So yes, thank you for the lovely introduction. And yes, I'm the founder of Season and Cycle, which is, yes, both a holistic women's health practice as well as, kind of just a growing community. And I have it's also so Season and Cycle is also name of my Substack, where I will share writings and about cyclical living and recipes and things there as well. I've always been kind of like that left and right brain. So I kind of feel like I have that both in my business as well.
Yeah.
So there's kind of that piece of it. And I think that really is also that is my story as well. I really came about this work from two places. One of them was my own personal experience when I was 22. And just decided to throw my birth control in the garbage one day. And like what happened after that, which turns out was a major hormonal and life transition, but I didn't know what was happening, and my world kind of turned upside down. And I like to say it was a bit of like a dumpster fire. But it was like one of those beautiful fires that from it, like from the ashes, something really amazing arose, which is the work that I do now. And that's in part why I'm so passionate about just sharing about and supporting women in that time of transition, because it's really just never talked about. What's physically happening to our body when we do decide to switch off of or go on to hormonal birth control. And it can be akin to like going through puberty or perimenopause or postpartum. And I feel like nobody really, again, it's very rare that you'll hear that shared. And the great thing about that and like knowing it and learning about it is just like those other hormonal transitions in our life, there's ways that we can support our body holistically to ease them and make them, less challenging. I think we hear a lot about the challenging pieces of hormonal transition, but there's definitely ways that we can ease that. And then there's a lot of beauty to be found in them as well. And that's really where the cyclical living piece of my work and my own life came about. I have a corporate background, as I think maybe many of us who are starting or have started our own businesses do, and just never really fit into that mold and couldn't really figure out why. And I worked with basically all men in the business I was in, and tried to keep up and just, work the same way for 15 plus years, and burnt myself out continually. Um, and finally just realized, there has to be a better way. And I actually took, my husband and I took some time off to travel right before COVID happened, tried to take a sabbatical, which didn't happen, of course. But we had this time and space during COVID, where we were both able to really kind of create and spend focused time on what our next steps were. So I was able to actually move like fully into working with women in this space, instead of it having just not just, but instead of having it be my own kind of like way of living personally, and then supporting those that I love in my life. So that was kind of that shifting point for me, as I think many, also into when it became a full-time business instead of kind of just a personal passion. So that's that.
Yeah.
That's the short version.
I know.
That was hard.
Like whenever I ask people to like tell me their story, whenever they first come onto the podcast, there's a potential for it to be like the whole episode.
How much time do you have? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that abbreviated version. And I think that there's so many important elements there. Like there's topics that really stand out to me of, switching off of hormonal birth control, of cyclical living, of like kind of changing from that corporate, like male dominated space to really honoring how we as women operate, through cycles. And so, could you dive a little bit deeper into like what's like cyclical living? I hear the term, and many people hear the term. What exactly does that mean for you as someone who works in this space pretty frequently?
Well, I love that you said "for you," because that's because it can mean, right? It's up to interpretation, really.
Yeah, totally.
But I'm happy to share like how I work with it personally and how I work with it in my business. But basically, the way that I see it is that cyclical living is just like any way in that we're living within, or like in alignment or in tune with any of nature's cycles. So there's many, many cycles. There's our menstrual cycle and hormonal cycle. There's the lunar cycle, or like lunar phases. There's the seasonal cycles. There's the life cycle. So there's all these different cycles. And in my work, there's like, I personally also love astrology. So I work with like the astrology, and I work with, I'm starting to work with like I'm Alaskan Native, so I'm indigenous to like here, but then I also am very Scottish, and it turns out I found in the last few years. So I've been dipping my toe into the Celtic wheel and the cycles there as well, and like getting a little more of there. And it's so interesting when you dive deep. I've spent a lot of time like diving deep into each of these cycles throughout my personal journey. And it's so interesting. Like the deeper you go into any of these cycles, the more they just all map back to the same rhythm. And so the cyclical living is really just, how can we find both that natural rhythm within our own body, and then how can we connect with those natural rhythms around us? And the way that I approach it, and the way that I really encourage like women I work with to approach it in my practice or at retreats, is to start with the cycle that resonates with you the most, and that you're already the most like naturally connected with. And maybe when I say that, people are like, I have no idea. I don't feel connected to any, which is where I started my journey. And for me, it was just like a beginning to just notice. I live in the Pacific Northwest. So there's 4 seasons here. So realizing that I was already really connected to the seasons, and then just leaning a little more deeply into that. And then next for me came the menstrual cycle. And I think what I'd love to share on that in cyclical living, because I think the internet's a wonderful thing. It's great that there's more and more information out there about things for us as women. There's also a lot around female biohacking and like cycle sync your life and all of this. And
Yeah.
I do cycle syncing with myself and my clients and everyone, but I kind of approach it from a slightly different um, way. And I really encourage people, if they're interested in cycle syncing and cyclical living, and they want to start with their menstrual cycle, to really start with their own menstrual cycle, because it's very easy to look at a post, say, that says, eat this in your luteal phase, or, eat this or thing here, or work out like this here.
Yeah.
Which is really great advice. Again, we'll probably get into that idea, some of those ideas today. And I'm happy to share some of those practical things, because I'm a very again, that left brain, right brain. I love the practical, tangible thing I can go and do. And before we get there, it's really important to build an intimate relationship with our own personal menstrual cycle, because our menstrual cycle is like a personality. So every menstrual cycle is completely unique. And not only is it unique to you in your life, it's as as a woman, right? It's going to change throughout your lifetime. It's going to go through many iterations. You may not have it at all times throughout your menstruating years, right? If you're pregnant, or if you have PCOS, or many, many things can cause our cycles to go missing for a while. So it's going to change as well. And it can be different month to month as well. It can be different cycle to cycle. So until we really can build that intimate relationship with our own cycle, it can be a little bit, I feel it can be a little problematic and overwhelming to try to cycle sync every part of your life before you actually know, oh, I'm ovulating here, or, oh, I'm in my luteal phase now.
Yeah.
And it's not, most of the things out there aren't going to do you harm if you're doing them in the wrong part of your cycle. But if you really want to, I think the magic and the power and a lot of the healing that is actually found in that first step of connecting with your own unique cycle, and kind of knowing your own cyclical nature, and then starting to apply some of these fun tools. I always say it's kind of like the sprinkles or the frosting. Cycle syncing is. But we got to bake the cake first.
Oh yeah. I so resonate with that, because it is so different for each person. And whenever you say that, what comes up for me is that I think many people, not just women, but many people look so much to external things to find solutions. And with social media and with just the internet in general, everybody has a solution that they've experienced in their own life, or that they've pulled from somebody somewhere else. And it can get, like you said, a little overwhelming with all of the information that is out there, which I think is good, but then also it does kind of pull people away from tapping into that internal wisdom and what's actually happening within their bodies. So for you, whenever people are just starting this journey of implementing cyclical living, where do you suggest people start in order to create that intimate relationship?
I love that question. With charting your cycle, and I always say, chart your cycle, change your life. That's if I was to write a book, or if I do write a book,
that's what it would be called. That's a really catchy title, though.
I have a workshop that I've taught in the past on it.
Yeah.
Because I do this, the single practice of cycle charting changed. I mean, I don't say this lightly. It literally changed my life. It changed every aspect of it for the better. And most importantly for me, it was the most empowering. And I see this time and time again with women I work with. It's the simplest practice. It's the simplest thing to do. And it's the thing that creates the most transformation and is the most empowering as women. Because what it's doing is it's connecting you daily with your body, right? And we're just in a world where we're kind of continually disconnected from our bodies. And then once we're connected with it and we learn our body, I don't know about you, but I didn't trust my body for most of my life till I was, past 30. And now not only do I trust it, but I feel like I'm in partnership and in a relationship with it. And I'm by cycle charting, I'm communicating with my body daily, which was something throughout my life that was really, really challenging. Like I grew up as a dancer. So my body was a tool. Like I had eating disorders, disordered exercise patterns, like all the way into college. So my body was like not a safe place, right? Like I was constantly trying to change it, fix it, or in dance world, like make it better. Like it was never good enough, it just so I think that's where a lot of the healing for me was in this work personally, was that I was like coming back into my body, which I had never really felt or been taught was a safe place to be, and didn't know how to communicate with it. Um, and I think a lot of times some of these things are very like ethereal that are talked about, like connect with your body. I'm like, I'm
so
a freaking dancer. Like I'm like connecting with my body every day, right? And then I was like, wait, no, I'm using my body as a tool every day. I'm really disconnected from it. And that was one of those like, mind moments. Those like light bulb moments in my life of like, oh, I am not embodied. I am not in my body. I'm actually disconnected and out of my body. And charting helped me get into that. And there's many ways to do that. I can talk a little bit about again, like the practicality if people want to get started with that, and they're like, well, what the heck is it? So, and I like to talk about like the difference between cycle charting and like a period tracking or tracking.
Because I was just going to ask if it was different or if it was the same.
So it is different and can turn into the same. So the biggest thing with cycle charting, there's not like one right or wrong way to do it. Like I have a tool that I've created, and it's like people can get it on my Substack for free. It's a PDF, you print it out, but it's a physical practice, and there's a reason behind that. But if you don't like my tool, there's a lot of different ways out there to chart. It's just about the practice of doing it daily to start. And so the difference between charting and tracking is that tracking is more of just looking at, okay, like maybe it's, when's my period arriving? Like when am I ovulating? It's more of, just kind of like keeping track of, right? Like keeping track of when those things are happening. And there's charting is a daily mindfulness practice is the way that I describe it when I'm working with women, and the way I think about it in my life. And it's like, so the way I teach it and approach it is it's like 2 minutes or less a day. But I have women just close their eyes and take like 60 seconds in silence to themselves, which in itself is like, if you've never done it, try it. It actually is like 60 seconds can change everything. Especially if you're a mom or a very busy like entrepreneur. Sometimes we don't realize that we go through our entire day and we don't even take 60 seconds to do nothing. And so, you don't have to do that piece of it, but I do find it helps kind of us like drop into our body. So just like have women take 60 seconds to themselves, eyes closed, eyes open, whatever. Just take a breath, whatever you're going to do. And then after that, you have this PDF, which oddly enough, I usually have right in front of me, but it's under a stack of papers at the moment. But it's just a circle chart, and it has a place for every day of your cycle. And you just take a minute to reflect. And depending on what like I'm focusing on with the women I work with, I might have them chart different things, because like cycle charting can tell you so much, and we can use it. And we'll talk about this a little bit with like your business, if you're an entrepreneur, like how you can use your cycle chart daily there. But when you're just getting started, you really just want to look at, how do I feel physically, mentally, and emotionally? And it could just be one word. Like some words in my cycle, literally the only word is hungry. Or especially when I was starting out, so I feel like it takes a little bit of time to start to kind of tap into these things, because we don't usually ask ourselves these questions on a daily basis. And some days it'd just be moody, or like got in a fight with my husband, or whatever it was. And at first it's just kind of, you're like, okay, cool. Someone told me to do this. But, you do it. And the recommendation that I always give is 3 cycles to start. Like, just commit to it to 3 cycles. If you miss a day,
Yeah.
whatever, it's not the end of the world. Get back into it, right? Like, we're just learning. It's a new habit that we're building. But I
Mhm.
use it as a daily mindfulness practice where I take that minute and then I ask myself, in this day with my cycle, just how am I feeling? And what you'll start to notice is over time, so I have like years of this now.
Mhm.
And when I work with clients, we usually work together for, like 3 months at a minimum, if not more. Or if it's retreat guests, they return year after year. Like, they've been doing it for a year. So there's like lots of fun data to work with. There's fun,
Mhm.
like, all this information, all of this communication we've been having with our body. We can then read our charts. Like,
Mhm.
so you can kind of
Yeah.
read them like an astrology chart. Like, it's telling you a lot of your body's telling you a lot every day. And this just starts to like give you a way to see those patterns start to uncover like what's happening and start that daily dialogue with your body.
Mhm.
You will then kind of naturally start to notice what in your life is cyclical and what is not. And it's just so, for some examples on my chart, I can now pinpoint basically the day of the month I'm gonna get in an argument with my husband, like,
Mhm.
regardless, right? So we
Yeah,
joke, we would
interesting.
joke too, like, Do you wanna just, like, go out of town for the day? Should, like, I plan a business trip? Because it's like it's just like
Yeah,
clockwork, right? Like, it's cyclical.
right.
And, all jokes aside, it's because, like, there's significant mood swing from
Yeah.
part of my cycle to the next. Like, regularly, I have this client that I love. One day she came to me and she was like, "You know what I realized this last cycle?" I was like, "What?" She's like, "I hate my husband the same 3 days of the month every month, and I used to worry that it meant I was with the wrong person." And I realized it was just cyclical, and this was
Yeah.
kind of for myself in my own personal journey as well. It was, um, I thought I was in therapy at the time actually, and I thought I had, like depression, like I was depressed.
Mhm.
And come to find out, this was before I started cycle charting. She was like, just map like your moods and emotions
Mhm.
over a month,
Mhm.
over a couple months. And I realized I'd have these really down days, like negative, I scale them. They
Yeah.
were like -8, -10 days. And I looked back over a couple months and I was like, it's the same
Yeah.
few days, but it can feel when you're in them like it's the entire month or the entire part of your cycle.
Mhm.
So by cycle charting, it can help us look and see like which of these things, because it could be physical, it could be emotional experiences. It could be cramps or PMS or arguments with loved ones or
Mhm.
anything like that. Is there a cyclical nature to it? And a lot of times, if there is with myself or like again with
Mhm.
women I work with, it's like literally just the awareness of that
Mhm.
shifts so much
Yeah.
that there's like they're inherently, and it's completely normal. And like that's something again that we're just not told as women. So like the male hormones
Yeah.
are the same. They're on a 24-hour cycle. So that they're the same day to day. And we're on a 28-day cycle as women.
Mhm.
So it's complete like think if you think about any man in your life, right? Like they fluctuate throughout the day. We all do. But
Mhm.
men have this very steady like hormonal
Yeah.
rhythm day to day. We have a very steady hormonal rhythm. It's just it's month
Yeah.
to month. And so, no one questions if a man is like energized at 10 a.m. and tired at 2 p.m.
Mhm.
But, you know, we ourselves question all the time, like, why am I so energized like this time of the month?
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, I can't get off the couch. It's like, okay, well, probably you were ovulating and now your period's about to start, right? So, like,
Yeah.
it's just as normal. It's just that it hasn't been normalized
Totally.
yet. So,
Yeah.
again, so cycle charting is a very deep rabbit hole. Again,
Yeah.
why I could probably write a book, would love to write a
Right.
book on it. It's a rabbit hole that can lead to so many things, but it also can give us a lot of peace of mind, and it can be really helpful as well for us to be a advocate of our own health, because we can take
Yeah.
this with us to our medical care providers and just say, hey, I've noticed a cyclical nature to this, or this is the other great thing about cycle charting, is you'll start to realize what's not cyclical,
Hmm.
which is equally as important, because
Yeah.
maybe it is that you're experiencing some sort of symptoms
Yeah.
not within your cycle, and maybe it's not connected hormonally, and it's something that you want to seek out support with. So I think it can really help us advocate for our own health in
Hmm.
ways that we're just not taught to as women. And a lot of times things can be dismissed, and this is just a great way to say, I have this data.
Hmm. Yeah.
I've been charting my cycle for 6 months. Every every cycle this is happening here. Can you help me uncover if there's some sort of connection
Hmm.
happening here?
Yeah.
So I think that there's so much, and it's, again, just the most simple thing. Of course, building a new habit isn't always simple, but once
Yeah.
there's this tipping point that I've found with clients and with myself, where it goes from being a practice to just something that is second nature.
Yeah.
And so that can happen with any of this. So cycle charting, I don't chart as intently as I used to, because it's become second nature that every day I'm checking in with
Yeah.
my cycle. And I also do natural contraception, so I'm checking in with my cervical mucus. I'm checking in with my body. It's just become second nature, and I'm aware when something's shifting or off now.
Hmm.
But that took years, right? And so
Yeah.
having just the simple practice and returning to it day to day of what's happening in my cycle today starts to lay that foundation. And
Hmm.
then where it gets really exciting is then we can use that. Once we know our own cycle and our own, that's where cyclical living really gets fun. Because
Yeah.
then we can use that information to help us really thrive, and to, I always try to find other words that aren't just everywhere, but I don't
Yeah.
it to flow. I mean, that's everywhere too, but it
Yeah.
really, that's the only way to describe it, is it is that flow state. We
Hmm.
get into that flow state of living with the flow of our natural,
Yeah.
and our personal cyclical rhythm.
Yeah. That is so beautiful. I love how you explained it as we are really just gathering information. And one of the things that I've noticed is just from my own personal experience, right? I would kind of go through my day to day. And if I was having a mood swing or some kind of hormonal fluctuation and just not be aware of it, there's a part of, I think a lot of women experience this. There's a part of us that thinks I'm choosing this. I am
Mhm.
there's something wrong with me that I'm feeling this way. There's something that I need to do to fix it, to change it or whatever. And that's where we kind of get caught up in that, how the male hormonal cycle is way more normalized. So we try all the things to keep up. Um, and I think that it has been so damaging in society today,
Yeah.
but there are these tools like cycle charting and things like that that can kind of help us be more aware of what our own bodies are telling us and use it as data. We can't do anything if we don't actually know the information. And so I love that this practice is kind of an empowering tool to give women um to understand what's actually happening and make decisions from there versus wish that our bodies were doing something different, you
Yeah,
know?
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you put that perfectly. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it just happened to me yesterday. I can't remember now.
Yeah.
What it was. It's something in my life, and then I looked at my phone, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, well,
Yeah.
there we
That makes
go." I
sense.
was like, "Well, I'm on that cycle." Because even someone who does this for a living, it just
Yeah.
later in the day, I forget.
Yeah.
Because life goes on. I'm like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm deep in my inner autumn," which is I could talk a little bit about the inner seasons, since I realized I've maybe mentioned this a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And this also helps because I did want to mention, I wanted to talk a little about what to do if you don't have a period right now, or if you have irregular cycles,
Yeah,
or maybe if
totally.
you have a daughter, or someone in your life who's about to go through puberty.
Mm-hmm.
So we can use this framework called the inner seasons to
Mm-hmm.
help us. Not only I find it like it's the way to kind of embody the hormonal
Mm-hmm.
cycle. So we could talk about the phases of the hormonal cycle, and it's really great to know all of those. Um, and so we have like the menstrual cycle, and we have the follicular phase, and we have
Mm-hmm.
ovulation, and then we have the luteal phase.
Mm-hmm.
I won't go super deep into each of them,
Yeah.
but we also, there's this framework, the inner seasons, where we can layer over the seasons in nature. And each season aligns with each of the phases of our hormones.
Yeah.
And so winter and our menstrual cycle pair up. And so if you
Mm-hmm.
just think for a minute about how nature behaves, and how nature behave is a weird word, how nature kind of like nurtures herself in winter. There we go.
Yeah.
How nature nurtures herself in winter, we can nurture ourselves like that in our inner winter. And
Yeah.
typically we naturally are wanting to do that anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really what I think cyclical living and cycle charting and all of it can help us realize, is like, this is innately encoded within us as women. This isn't,
Mm-hmm.
we're not like, I'm not teaching anyone anything new. I'm just like giving a map and helping like give some guidance
Mm-hmm.
to to connect back with what's innate within you. And so that's where that's where like you start with cycle charting, for example, or whatever you're going to start with, that is this practice. But then this momentum builds and it becomes second nature, because it's encoded within you. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just the menstrual cycle and inner winter is a really easy way to see this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about anybody else, but like if you think about how you feel in winter and you think about how you feel when you're on your period, a lot of times
Yep.
they mirror up.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Totally.
and then you can use that, right? So you're like, okay, well, if it's winter out, I want to be warm typically. And we can translate that. So it is important to like keep our womb spaces warm. And we can do that through keeping our feet warm, or like
Mm-hmm.
physically wrapping a blanket around our womb, right? Or a heat pad, whatever we like when we're on our period. But also eating warm foods, and like, what's nature doing? If you think about like the growing cycle, right? There's not
Mm-hmm.
trees, like cherry blossoms aren't blooming in winter.
Right.
We're resting. So
Yeah.
again, like, okay, just so starting to look at some of these things. And then our inner spring refers to follicular phase, which is that transition phase as we're going from our period to ovulation.
Mm-hmm.
And then ovulation aligns with summer. And then our luteal phase is after we ovulate until we bleed again. And that
Mm-hmm.
aligns with autumn or fall in nature. And so these same things, you can think about nature, what's nature doing? How do you feel about the seasons? And then think about those parts in your menstrual cycle
Mm-hmm.
and see if there's any connection. And also, if
Mm-hmm.
you're wondering, how do I like care for myself and nourish my cycle in this season, just think like, what would I do? What would nature do
Yeah.
in fall, right? What would
Yeah.
nature do in spring? And that I have found is a way to kind of start to embody deeper the experience of being a cyclical being with
Yeah.
a 28-day hormonal cycle that can feel a little bit like out here in our minds. It kind of takes it into a felt experience in our body.
Mm-hmm.
And so to take that one step further, if you are not having a period right now, or you have irregular cycles, and the thought of trying to chart cycle to cycle, you're like, I don't even know when my next period's going to arrive. It could
Mm-hmm.
be 8 days, it could be 20, 28, it could be like 45.
Yeah.
We can use the inner seasons in the lunar cycle, because the lunar cycle, so this is what you're talking about, cyclical living, all these
Yeah.
cycles mirror each other. The lunar cycle mirrors the menstrual cycle and the seasonal cycle. So
Mm-hmm.
the new moon aligns with our period or with our inner winter. So if you're not having a period, or you can just align with the new moon, or if you have irregular cycles, or if you just want to do it instead to start with. Some women just love the moon and they want to start there because they're just not as comfortable connecting and diving like right into their menstrual connection. The lunar cycle is a beautiful way to start. And then the waxing moon, so it's as it's going from the new moon to the full moon. That's the same as like our follicular phase energetically. And then ovulation is the full moon. And then the waning moon is when it's going from full to dark again. And the new moon aligns with the luteal phase, or our inner autumn. And the moon is a very energetic, and it is a woo-woo thing. And I am like a woo-woo spiritual person, but also I'm a science person. And there's science to the lunar impact. And as a nurse, I'm sure maybe you can attest to the fact that like full moons, more people get injured, more babies are born. Nature is doing things that influences our body. And there's a lot of scientific reason for that. But kind of the most obvious one is that we are mostly water. And as women, we have water in our womb spaces. And if you think about the tides and what's happening with the tides, in alignment with the moon, right? Like the moon influences the water and the tides. So of course, being mostly water and holding water in our womb space, we are influenced, and we are also pulled by those influences, like gravitational pull and influences of the moon. So yes, there is like a spiritual and kind of like woo aspect to the lunar. And there also though is a scientific aspect to it. And so I just like to say that because some people need both. Some people just want one or the other. And some people are like, well, I don't know, really, like using the moon? It's like, no, you will start to notice. And even so, like, I use both. I use like both and for my cycle charting now. And I usually like I don't do it all at once with women when we're working together. We kind of start with one, but you can start to layer these on top of each other because if there's a day, for example, where you're like, I'm ovulating, but I feel off, like something is funky, right? You can look at the lunar phase, or for me, again, like I work with astrology, so then I'll look like, oh, what's the moon in, and what phase is she in? Like what lunar, like what sign is the moon in? And I work with that as well. But it's a way to say, oh, because maybe you're ovulating and you're in your summer and you're like, I feel like I should be really energized and like want to like connect, or like my libido is usually better than this. What's going on? And it's just this kind of one-off, then you can look at some of these these other cycles. Maybe it's winter outside, right? Maybe it's not that's a new moon in Scorpio. Like that has a very different vibe than ovulation. So we can kind of look to these things. And then again, using our cycle charts, we can also look at other phases and see how, because it's a cycle. So everything builds and like supports, but also impacts the next phase. So we can look back and say, oh, well, maybe it was something that like when I was on my period. Yeah. So anyways, there's a million ways that we can then like read our cycle charts once we have that data.
Yeah.
But I also did want to share how you can chart your cycle without the period. It's a really great practice to like lunar cycle chart for young girls as they're headed towards puberty, to kind of build that practice. It's a great thing to do when you're pregnant because you can stay connected with that cyclical nature, and you're also going through your own like cyclical experience in pregnancy, because pregnancy has its own cycle. So so there's cycles and cycles and
cycles upon cycles. I really
pick the one that resonates to start.
That's one of the things that really stood out to me as you were talking, was like picking the one that resonates, because obviously there are so many different ways that you could look at it. You could I mean, there's a different approach for everybody and whatever resonates. I think that's also important too, because these aren't like hard and fast rules. I sensed it as you were talking about it. I sensed it as a very intuitive process, and it's meant to not be so rigid, and
Yeah.
it's meant to
Yes.
be more flowy, and it, right,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
um I wonder if we could maybe touch on a couple of things that you notice whenever you're working with women who are in different phases. Like, because I imagine people listening to this are like, okay, cool. This is a nice way to track things and to gather data. But how do I actually apply it? Like, whenever I'm in each phase, what are the common things that you find are supportive for people in each phase?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. I let's start with spring because we're kind
Yeah.
of in spring, like in the
Yeah. Yeah.
spring
Yeah.
or our follicular. So to think about like a week that our period ends, like after our period ends. And I
Mhm.
actually want to start here because there's like a very important point that I
This is
think is
exactly where I'm at, so this is helpful.
okay,
Yeah.
perfect. It's exactly where you're at, and it's exactly where us as a collective are at in nature.
Yeah.
And it's especially in the Northwest, I
Yeah.
don't know, and, like, this winter really, like, made us work for spring. Like, as
Yes.
soon as the sun comes out, it's like, "It's summer."
Yeah.
A lot of so spring, our inner spring and that follicular phase, a lot of times we can shoot past or through if we're not careful, and there's actually, like, a lot
Mhm.
to nourish us here if we spend the time in it. So what's happening is our period ends and then it's a follicular phase. It's that inner springtime, and it's about 7 to 10 days typically for
Mhm.
women. And what I most often see is actually the beginning of this phase still feels a bit like winter.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
most of us feel like, oh my gosh, if we did rest, which I'm going to talk about when we're on our period, we
Mhm.
feel like, oh my gosh, now I have to catch up.
Mhm.
And so we will kind of just like bolt. So we have a puppy, right? So like the first day after we adopted him, I went to like get him out of his crate, and he just
Mhm. Yep.
right shot out of there. I feel like that is we like shoot out of the cave, right? As
Mhm.
women,
Yes.
and in spring. But if we actually can like allow ourselves to move into it, because if you think about spring, it actually like in nature is a very tender time. It's like these little buds of
Mhm.
flowers and things like that. We want to just kind of be tender with ourselves.
Mhm.
And yeah, sure, like allow ourselves, maybe we need to catch up on laundry or whatever we didn't do, right?
Mhm.
Or
Yeah.
sure. But I feel like we put a pressure on ourselves
Mhm.
to do everything. And that's where if we can just kind of like energetically and emotionally give ourselves a little grace to
Mhm.
ease into that, I find that for myself, I get a lot more out of that season personally
Mhm.
because I don't burn myself out by the time
Mhm.
ovulation comes. So, um, it is this kind of like tender springtime thing. The energies around this time are creativity and playfulness, like new
Yeah.
beginnings. It's a really great time. And our mind, I mean, right? Like if you think about it, our bodies aren't in silos. So our hormones are impacting every part of our body as they're fluctuating. And it
Mhm.
includes our mind. So our mind is actually wired to do some things better than other things at different times of the month, which I think is the most amazing female superpower that
Yes.
exists. And it should be, it's like my favorite thing to really, I ride those waves. We're like very, I like to say, like, if we kind of pause in this
Mhm.
phase, it allows us to see the plan. And
Mhm.
so it's also, again, like a time where we're naturally kind of inclined to begin new things.
Mhm.
And so, just from a business standpoint, if we want to have like
Mhm.
practical things from a business standpoint, that it's a really great time to like do planning. It's
Yeah. Yep.
and not necessarily I mean, you do day-to-day planning. Like there's all sorts of planning practices that we can do at all parts of our cycle. But I'm talking a little more of like the vision, like holding our vision and planning our vision, because we have this kind of expansive mindset at the time. It's like strategic thinking, strategic planning of things. It's a great time to do things like that. It's a great time. We didn't talk too much about food because we would literally be here all day, but you can cyclical cook and eat. And some of the things in spring, I say the easiest thing is just to like throughout our cycle, we can think about different colors of the rainbow. And green is akin to spring. And the reason for that is just like all things green can really help support our body. A lot of times it's like leafy greens, cucumbers, cilantro, things all help us to detoxify our bodies and help, because when we're on our period, our body is naturally, it's a detoxification process that our body is going through. If we haven't naturally fully kind of detoxified or gotten like kind of all of our excess hormones out, by supporting our bodies in our inner spring with detoxification, we can help aid it in like continuing that process and kind of seeing it through. Which is really, it's important for so many things within our body. So, but I say spring is green. So like eat green things, young foods, like sprouted things, eggs. Again, there's on my Substack, people can find, I write my recipes by inner season, and there's also like a fridge food list that people can grab. So, and it's color coded. So
Love it.
Shopping
Love it.
this free phase. So there's some things that we can do there. It's also fun from like an exercise standpoint. If we want to look at kind of all the lifestyle buckets, is to try new things. So maybe even wanting to like try a dance class or like a new anything at your gym, or I barely leave my house. I don't leave my house often, especially right now with a puppy. So, just like I like to just pick a different workout on my app and just try it, because we're a little more open. It's a great time to start new habits. So it's actually a great time to start cycle charting. So that would be spring. That would be our follicular phase. And the reason for this is estrogen is rising. That's what's happening hormonally. And estrogen is naturally giving us more energy, kind of a confidence boost as we're leading up to our peak ovulation. When that egg gets released, also we get a spike of testosterone that kicks in. So this summer phase or ovulatory phase in our cycle is just like a powerhouse time. I will caveat that to say it's not necessarily that way for everybody. I've experienced both throughout my personal journey. And when going through it's kind of, some of it can have to do energetically just with our relationship, like with ovulation in general, and maybe motherhood, or if we're on a fertility journey, like there's things that can make ovulation, that time in our cycle, more challenging. Also, if we kind of like shoot out of the gate from our period and we just kind of blow right into life again, we can be exhausted and depleted by the time ovulation rolls around. So I think out there, a lot of times people are like, it's inner summer, like you're ovulating, you should feel really sexy, and you should like feel like talking to everybody, and it's a great time to like do podcast interviews or whatever, which definitely can be the case. But like if you're not feeling that, it's okay. There's a lot of reasons. There's nothing wrong with you. Like women experience ovulation a lot of different ways. So don't be discouraged if you are like trying to cycle sync and ovulation was one of those times in the past where I had a lot of like emotion. It was really emotionally charged and challenging time. And I wouldn't I would inevitably cry. I would be exhausted. I'd like get in an argument with my partner. And I felt like, oh, something is wrong. I'm supposed to be like wanting to have sex with you right now. But really all I want to do is like cry and yell at you, like things where, And that, that was a phase of my cyclical journey, and it has since shifted, and that's fantastic. But I don't want to discount that phase, and like it can, and also to say that can shift as we kind of like dive deeper into our cyclical journey. So, but some of the things that I guess you'd say would be like typical for our ovulation is it is a really good time. We are typically more attractive to ourselves at that time. And I've also heard that our like features and things actually change. I don't know. But we are just like typically more attractive to ourselves, and which means that our confidence is higher. We're also getting this like testosterone bump, and like our estrogen is peaked. Like our hormones are kind of at their highest point. So our energy is typically highest. Our confidence is typically really high. So doing things in a business like a podcast interview can be great, or being on video, or like spending more time on social media if that's something that you do, or going to networking events. Things like that may feel more natural to you. And then for food, I was about to say something. I'm gonna keep it on track. I'm gonna come back to what I was about to say. I'm gonna just go. It's really thinking about. So we really want nutrients dense foods, and there's a couple of reasons for this. It's like we're getting ready to ovulate. We really want to like support our bodies in that. That is like it's going through its energy. It's exerting energy to do that. Also, though, typically we are like more fast moving at this time of our cycle. We're doing more. You'll probably, as you chart, start to notice just natural tendency to do more things during this time of your cycle, even though you're not consciously doing it. Because of that, we actually usually eat less unconsciously. And so we want our meals to be nutrient dense so that we're still getting what we need, even though we're maybe on the go more. And it's a great time if you do like things like HIIT workouts. It's a great time to do things like that from a workout standpoint. And and I think that's kind of it. The other thing, the kind of last thing on ovulation I like to say is like I love to work with clients on like saving some of that energy for yourself, because as women we tend to like to give that all away. And that is like again embedded and encoded within us. It's because it is the time where like we can conceive. So it's our body, biologically our bodies are in more of like a giving mode. And it kind of also aligns. We didn't talk about archetypes, but it aligns with like the mother archetype in this time of our cycle. So it's whether or not you are like a mother of a biological mother or not, it's just mothering of anything. It comes more naturally. And because of that, especially when I work with women who are business owners, they will tend to give all that excess energy to their business and try to work these extra long days because they have more energy. And
I'm laughing because I'm resonating.
Like it's not a bad thing again, but maybe one of those nights, like, give it to a date night, or give it to like a date with your kids, or like give it to yourself just for like a movie night, like give some of it back to yourself.
And a lot of people listening to this are probably shaking their heads too. Like, yep, I get that.
It's so easy to give it all away.
It is so easy.
But you're going to want it in this next phase that's coming up, with most of us probably know well, which is the premenstrual phase. It gets a real bad rap. And I will say, just very briefly, like from my work with women and my own personal journey, the reason that I see this happening is because our body, after we ovulate, is asking us for something very different from a cyclical living standpoint. It's asking us to live in a way that is not natural to us in our modern society. And that is slowing down and being more self-centered. And it's especially for women not natural, from what my own personal experience, and I think just
uncomfortable for sure.
It's an uncomfortable space. And then on top of that, for many reasons, a lot of us experience premenstrual symptoms in this phase as well. So not only are you like emotionally frustrated, your
Mm-hmm.
body it can result in like physical manifestation of PMS.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this phase gets a really bad rap. It actually is my favorite phase of the cycle now, which
Yeah.
if you had asked me that like 5 years ago, I'd be like,
Yeah.
hard pass on premenstrual phase, right? Like
Right.
if I
Right.
don't have to go through it, I won't. But now it is my favorite, and that's because it's actually a very intuitive time. And I also feel like it feels more natural now. I'm about to turn 40. So as I'm headed more towards like perimenopause in my life phase, it starts to become and feel more natural because as our hormones are shifting throughout our like hormonal life stages,
Mm-hmm.
it actually starts like perimenopause is kind of this like no bullshit, like no nonsense phase of our life where we know
Yeah.
what's important to us now and we feel more comfortable like in ourselves and our needs and like advocating for those
Mm-hmm.
versus and so we all experience this within our inner autumn as well, just every single month. It's like practice, really,
Yeah.
is what it is. And so it's really uncomfortable for a lot of us in our 20, like teens, 20s, 30s. I have personally found as I'm headed more towards 40s that it's becoming more easeful. And
Mm-hmm.
also I think just the work of cyclical living has made it more easeful. And I find that is with women I work with as well. It's just like it's once a lot of times when I'm working with women, and again in my personal journey, I was healing physical things first. Like
Yeah.
I was healing um, all sorts of things with like PMS and PMDD, and I have
Mm-hmm.
endometriosis and didn't know it. So like I was healing all these physical things. So this time wasn't fun, but and it's still not always great. But there's just I don't know. There's this like depth to it if we allow ourselves to slow that we can connect with ourselves and our intuition deeper, which as a business owner, I found invaluable.
Yeah.
Um, and I won't go too deep into it, but
Yeah.
um, where I really want to. Okay, I'm just going to do it really quick. At the end of at the end of the luteal phase, there is a place called the menstrual void, and it comes at a
Mm.
different place in every woman's cycle.
Yeah.
But it's the reason I want to say this because I know your audience. There's a lot of business owners.
Yes.
Do not quit your business in the cycle of
Yeah.
this part of your cycle. Like, just do yourself a favor because you will probably want to. And if you start to track things cyclically when it comes to your business, you may find around the same time in that luteal phase, like right before your period starts, you think, why am I doing any of
Yeah.
this?
It's like we want to burn our business to the ground because we hate it
Yes.
so
Yeah.
much.
And that's a time where like my teacher, she called it was like the inner critic, like the inner critic gets really loud and our confidence gets low.
Yeah.
And that's that kind of combination. But hormonally also what's happening is like our hormones are dropping as we head towards
Yeah.
our period. So
Mhm.
there's a reason for it happening. And again, just like a lot of times if you can find those days by charting,
Mhm.
it brings some softness just to have the awareness. So there's a lot we can do in this phase to support ourselves. And it's actually really important to support ourselves in this phase because it is kind of this uncomfortable and less natural way
Yeah.
of our body is trying to help us. So after we ovulate, progesterone rises, and progesterone is actually a calming hormone, believe it or not.
Mm,
So I get
mhm.
asked this all the time. I am not calm in this phase of my cycle. Like, what's happening? You're telling me this is a calming hormone, but like that's the opposite of how I feel. And again, like from what I've seen in my like work, it's because our body is producing progesterone and is asking us to calm. And we are continuing to live life at
Yep.
a frantic pace. And it's
Mhm.
a friction, it's energetic, but it's also physical. And then it manifests in PMS symptoms a
Mhm.
lot of times. That's not to dismiss. There are a lot of other reasons that PMS symptoms are happening, but there is a lot at play there with just how we are approaching life And if we can shift things a little bit. So one of them is literally just slowing down. So like I walk, when I'm walking the dogs, I try to like walk slower when I'm in this phase of my cycle. In our business though, it's a really intuitive time. And so we actually are more deeply, our intuition is more deeply connected at that time. And so we can go inwards a lot more. And so it's a really good time to create like I create like a list. Basically, I go through my to-do list and I just cross out things that actually are not
Yeah.
needed over the next few weeks. So really good time to do that. It's a great I write in this time because I just feel more connected personally.
Yeah.
It's actually a really good time I find to do like client work because you are able to hold space in a different way and you're actually a little more grounded in your own self, in your own body. Like I'm in this, just full disclosure, like this is a phase I'm in right now. And
Yeah.
I love doing podcast interview. I love facilitating retreats in this part of my cycle because I just feel very grounded and able to connect in a different way. And this all to say, like cycle syncing, it's not we don't want to add to the to-do list, to the structures, right? It
Yeah.
actually is more about, these are guides, and
Yeah.
it's not about the thing always. It's about it can be about the intention. So
Yeah.
like
I like
I
how you're
wouldn't,
approaching the thing.
how you're approaching it. So
Yeah.
like if you looked at cycle syncing advice that's kind of out there and then you looked at my calendar this week, you'd be like, what?
Yeah.
Doesn't line up. But to me, it's like I can't change all the things that come on my calendar for my business, and I
Oh,
don't want
true.
to.
Yeah.
I do, some. I just took something off my calendar this morning because my period, like I do a little
Yeah.
bit, but it's more about like, oh, like, I'm in this phase of my cycle and I can access this energy, so I'm going to bring this energy to what I'm doing today. Because like
Yeah.
you're a parent, you can't be like, I'm not going to
Right.
be a parent today, right? So it's like bringing the attention
Yeah.
to, how am I going to parent today, right? Or just, and giving yourself that space and grace for, I'm in this phase of my cycle where I actually need to slow down a bit and I actually want to like have a little more time to myself, and that's okay. And I'm going to give that to myself, knowing that because I do that, I'm going to be able to like really cook a good meal and connect with my family later,
Mm-hmm.
versus like, oh shoot, well, I'm supposed to like cycle sync and do this, this part of my phase, and like I can't, like there's no way to do that. I feel like a lot of people just give up when they start to look at these lists or like read a book, because it's
Yeah.
like, well,
Yeah.
I can't do that. Like, does the person who write this have kids or a dog or like a job?
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
as you're saying that, I feel like it's not so much the like the things you're actually doing, it's the mindset, it's the approach, it's
Yeah.
kind of like how you're integrating and like embodiment. That's the word that
Yeah.
came to mind.
Yeah, and I think it's a both and. I think the
Mhm.
practices are a great way to get started. That's how I
Yeah.
started my cyclical living journey, because you need to try something, right?
Mhm.
But if you're looking at these, if you're reading things or you're like looking at other like books or something of mine later, and you're like, I can't do all this. Like, yeah, nobody can, and it's
Yeah.
totally fine. It's there's like the opportunity to try a few things here and there, and then there's the opportunity to just kind of like shift how we're approaching our life, our day, our mindset, based on where we're at in our cycle.
Mhm.
um, but my favorite thing about this luteal phase is there's this natural nesting energy and get shit done energy that
Yeah.
arises. And it's like when I tapped into this, which like having had a kid, maybe you've had this experience of like the right before birth nesting. It's like we actually have access to that every month. And like
Yeah.
I ride that wave with my business, especially, and my house cleaning, because I
Yeah.
hate cleaning my house. I hate, like that's not my strong suit, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I strategically will, like, the to-do list is my best friend in this phase, which I think a lot of people may think is kind of counterintuitive, but we have this, and the reason for it is our body is getting ready to rest. It's trying to like get us in a place where
Prepared.
we
Yeah.
prepared for what's coming, which is our period. And
Mhm.
so you can ride that, and I do. So like there's these
Yeah.
opportunities. Again, it's gonna be unique, it's gonna be different for your cycle, but you'll start to find when those days are for you. And from a food standpoint, though, I do want to, and from a workout standpoint, there's two things. So this is really about building strength in this time. So like weight resistance kind of
Mhm.
is really great. Um, Working more of that in and less cardio. So again, that's slowing. It's more about building like resilience. So
Mhm.
yoga, like holding poses longer, weightlifting, things like that is a good focal point there. And then food, it's about warm things and nourishing things and like orange and yellow foods or roasted yams,
Mm.
things that are feeling really nourishing and nurturing. A lot of us have sweet cravings at this time. So, like roasted root vegetables, dark chocolates,
Mhm.
like baked goods. So, all my recipes are gluten free, dairy free, plant
Mhm.
based for just so we get more vegetables and fruit in our diet. And
Yeah.
those are like common hormone imbalancers. So, a lot of women are trying to cut them out. But whether or not, like, whatever, though, eating that way of just like more nutrient
Mhm.
dense and rich foods that nourish us are going to help kind of ease those cravings and like PMS symptoms a lot that can kind of arise. Um,
Mhm.
Instead of feeling like you need to be like eating a salad. Like it's okay. So like our appetite fluctuates. So if you start to look at these things over a cycle, our
Mhm.
appetite fluctuates. Some women, because like I was saying, some days on my cycle chart just says hungry. It's in
Mhm.
this phase, and I let myself eat. And as someone who's like struggled with like disordered eating in the past,
Mhm.
this has been really nourishing for me to just realize like that is natural for appetite to ebb and flow. And
Mhm.
like you will naturally start to notice like you eat less in other parts of your cycle and it all kind of
Yeah.
balances out. Again, our bodies are geniuses.
They're
So we
so
let them do what
genius.
they want. So that just leads into our period, which I'm just going to end with that because it is like a little
Mhm.
more simple
Yeah.
and the hardest because it is the most unnatural. Because what I'm going to just say is rest.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave it at that. And it
Yeah.
does not mean sleep more. It does not mean like ditch all your responsibilities. It can mean if you're an entrepreneur, don't like I carve out a lot of intentional space, but also my cycle isn't super regular because I'm in
Mhm.
perimenopause. So it's starting to kind of get more regular. So I don't necessarily know exactly when it's going to arrive. I have a pretty good
Mhm.
idea, but that is very normal experience for all of us. We
Mhm.
can't plan to a T necessarily, but just finding what rest really means to us is
Mhm.
important because I think it can look like our body will want to naturally sleep a little bit later. So if you can let yourself sleep in or go to bed earlier, great. But if you can't, like what else is restful for you? You know,
Mhm.
it might be playing with your kid. It might be reading a book and taking a bath. It might be a long walk. It
Mhm.
might be a date night, right? So like rest looks different to everybody. But
Yeah.
finding what rest means to you. I have rest practices that I go to. I do yin yoga as well when I'm on my period. Napping can be a great exercise, count as exercise, like in
Mhm.
my book when we're on our period. We don't want to push our bodies too hard because they're using a lot of energy to shed our endometrial lining, to
Mhm.
detoxify our bodies. Like we want to kind of honor the processes that are happening in our body
Mhm.
and find what rest means and give ourselves more of that. Warm foods, again, really like think like red, dark foods like blackberries,
Mhm.
strawberries, like high antioxidant things.
Yeah.
Warmer foods that are easier for us to digest, like our digestion gets weaker because our body's focusing on other things, like a lot of other things at that time. Also, why we're more tired. Also, our
Mhm.
hormones are at a low point. So, like, it's all natural.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
normal to feel, and especially if you've never really allowed yourself rest on your period, like you're probably going to feel exhausted. What'll happen over time is when you actually do allow for that rest, it's an amazing and beautiful time for meditation. It's a time where I sit with my business and I look really closely at like what feels right, because we are like deeply intuitive when we're on our period.
Mm-hmm.
So I create time for meditation. I do yin yoga, and I have a notebook next to me because I get my creativity. I find this with a lot of women I work with as well. Like your creativity can flourish if you allow that time and space that your body's asking for.
Mm-hmm. I find that I get a lot of ideas. Like I get a lot of like downloads when I'm going on my walks. Really,
Yeah.
like that's because I do a lot of walks whenever I'm in that phase, and
Nice.
I have my phone out and like I do voice memos as I'm walking
I love that.
to
Yeah.
capture those. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. There's a huge opportunity for creativity in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Again, these kind of the luteal phase and the menstrual phase, is this like untapped intuitive time for us as women. And once we can kind of help heal our bodies and have them feel safe and like nourished in a way that can kind of help clear some of that top clutter, I guess, the way that like,
Mm-hmm.
and again, like I've experienced almost like everything when it comes to menstrual challenges. So I'm not making light of it. But once you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of start to, it's like an ocean or a lake, right? Like once you can kind of start to settle the waves a bit, there's all this beauty in like
Yeah.
the depths below. But we have to start where we're at, and that's kind of just the journey. It's lifelong work. This work, cyclical living, moves at the pace of nature. And
Yeah.
so just remind yourself of that. It's one of those things that I think it's like parenting. It's like the days, it's like if you look at your kid on a day-to-day basis, then you look at them, 5 years down the road. This is the
Yeah.
same thing. It's like these things might be subtle day to day and how they're changing or impacting your life. But if
Mm-hmm.
you do them for a few years and you look back, it's like your life is it's gone through this complete transformation and like
Mm-hmm.
growth experience. But it is like, and it is, yeah, so it moves at the pace of nature. It is longer term work, and it can be lifelong work in a really beautiful way. And it can help ease our experience as women as we go through the next cycles of each of of womanhood. So
Yeah.
it can guide us through conception. It can you know, guide us through postpartum. It can guide us through guiding others through puberty. It can guide us through perimenopause. It will guide us through menopause itself. And then after menopause, like it helps to prepare us for each of these life phases. And
Mm-hmm.
also it supports our well-being in all of these phases of womanhood as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Such good. And as you were explaining each phase, I'm sitting here like forgetting that I'm doing an interview because I'm like, I'm like wanting to like take notes.
It can be it's a lot, and you can tell I'm really passionate about it.
No, you are, and I love that. I love that. It makes me
I have to
it
like
kind of opens the invitation to like have you back and explore other aspects of your business because cyclical living, I can see how it can be like such like a rabbit hole, and it's just so expansive. There's so many different things that we could talk about. There's so many ways that you could implement it into your life, into your business, into your health journey, wherever people are. And I think it's because it's so flowy. Like it's not just a one size fits all approach. It is very individualized to each woman, to their cycle, to whatever is happening in their bodies and in their life. So, I mean, it's valuable to have some kind of context going into it if you've never done any kind of like cyclical living or planning or anything like that. Um, what would be like your like top piece of advice for someone new to cyclical living who's never really delved into it and they want to get started? Like what would be the place to start for you?
Wow. cycle charting.
Yeah.
And again, like I have a free tool for it if you want to use that. But like that is not by any means necessary or the only way to do it. It's like just finding a way to connect with yourself daily around your cycle. And so the way you would want to do this is just day one is the first day of your period or it's the new moon. And then just each day, whether it's in a journal, on the PDF that I have, if it's on your phone, really, I mean, I would recommend it being written, but because it transfers to our body in a different way than if we are on our phone. But just starting is more important than how you're doing it. And again, just every day asking and checking in with yourself. Just today, how do I feel emotionally? How do I feel physically? How do I feel energetically? And I also say to make note of any symptoms that you're having. And if you're a business owner, you can make note of like, what do I feel like doing in my business today or not? Like, it can be so simple. It can take less than 2 minutes. And you just do it daily. And over time, you'll start to see these patterns. And like you had said, it'll just start to kind of unfold and reveal itself to you of your own cyclical nature.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, really that's where I would start.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to gather the data and to start by just becoming aware of what is actually present.
Yeah. And if you want to start trying to like play around with things, I would just pick kind of one lifestyle bucket. Be that what you're eating, how you're working out, maybe like how you just what you're doing in your business. And play around with it. And I would start with one phase of your cycle as well. I wouldn't try to, because as you're charting, you're figuring out your own phases and when you're in them.
Yeah.
So I would pick one. So say, okay, I'm going to pick my menstrual phase and I'm going to look at food and what I'm eating for this next month. And it gives you then the time to like think about it, prepare, do the grocery shopping, find the recipes, whatever. Before you get to your period, batch cook. It's great before you get to your period. So it's kind of like ready.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's like you want to look at ovulation and what you do in your business and look at that for a month as you're getting ready and headed towards that and plan some podcast interviews or some video content you've been wanting to do. And just doing one of those each month and then continuing to chart because like I said, it moves at nature's pace.
Yeah.
And that's okay because we're natural beings. We're cyclical beings. It's our phase.
It is. It is. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Where can people find you after hearing more about cyclical living and wanting to, like, I know you've got a lot of free resources out there, but where are you hanging out? Where can people stay connected with you?
Yeah, I hang out on mostly Instagram and Substack. Both season at both. So Instagram's at Season and Cycle. My Substack, we'll link in the show notes. It's Season and Cycle, but it's also under my name, and my last name is hard to spell. So, but Season and Cycle and Substack as well, and that's where I have recipes by the inner season and resources like that are food specific. As well as just kind of like general, like nourishing your cycle, cyclical living. And then, my website is seasonandcycle.com. And that's more specifically focused on my work with women who are transitioning off of or switching off hormonal birth control or who have and are wanting to really look at like restoring their and connecting with their natural cycles. So feel free. I love to chat. Like, feel free to reach out. And then I do retreats as well. So that's on. I usually talk about those on Instagram. So we've got one coming up soon, and then we'll be doing one. I'll be cooking for one, both in the Pacific Northwest this summer.
Yeah, super excited to have you cooking for ours, and that's just
to nourish you all.
Yeah. And that's an invitation for any of you who have not signed up for the Be Seen retreat yet. That link will be in the show notes. It's July 26th through 28th here in the Pacific Northwest. at this point, everybody will probably already have listened to or have heard Sterling's podcast episode with me, Aowa's podcast episode with me, and all of these wonderful women are going to be featured at this retreat. And it's just going to be, I'm so excited. It's going to be the most nourishing, restorative, beautiful time. And I can't wait.
Can't either.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for being here. I'm so glad to have just been able to have you share your wisdom with everyone here. And yeah, I appreciate your time so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing and all the work that you do as well. So hope you have a lovely week.